Welcome to Decisions Lunch and Learn. I'm your host, Josh, and I will be walking through some submitted questions today. Reminder, if you have any questions, just to put it into the question and answer chat, and I'll get with them one by one in order in which they were submitted. So we'll give everyone a couple minutes just to log on here. We do have a pre-submitted question, so we'll hit that one first, and then anything else we will follow in suit. If we don't have any questions, I will just ramble on about decisions for the next 20 to 30 minutes. So, all right, we'll wait for people to join. Okay, it's 12:03, so we'll go ahead and just get started. We have a submitted question, but before that, my name is Josh. I work for Decisions. I've been here for going on 4 years in a couple months, and so I will be leading this Decisions Lunch and Learn. So welcome, and we'll just jump right in. So Tyson, I see you have a question that you pre-submitted, and it is, how can we add in a new property to a data type? The use cases we are looking at is for date time type. There is already a start of the year or start of the month and a start of the year. We want to add a end of the month and end of the year just to be a default property. Can we dynamically include rules into a rule set? So
second question.
It's more of the second question.
Well, I'd like to know the answer to both, but I put them all in one thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am going to, can you see my decision screen?
I can.
Okay, cool. So I'm not sure how to do the first one. Well, I'm not entirely sure. There's a method we can use to try to do this, and I'm willing to break my local host to get you that answer and to see if it's possible. So
nice.
Normally, if this was not a decisions native type, what I would recommend is if you go down to system, maybe designers, look up lists and constants, there is a special thing you can add here called a data extension. A data extension is essentially allowing you to make a flow to kind of get more data for the type that you have, right? Typical thing is here, every time you use accounts in decisions, you have it stored in first name, last name, email address. Those are different fields on the structure. But it's very common for us to use an account that has first name, last name in like a single field, so that you can potentially show it in drop down. So you potentially have a representation of that account, but it doesn't look like first name, last name. So you don't have to merge those things, right? I typically think of it like this way. You want to use a data extension when you want the data to look a certain way, but you don't want it to be stored a certain way. So you can use this data extension. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set one up for date time. Now, the reason I say this might be a dangerous kind of adventure that we're going to perform right now is because decisions, this date time is a decisions native type. It's not a structure. It's a type that you can pick, right? So this might not work. I'm hoping that it would work, but let's just see. So I'm going to put date time extension, and then create. So come over here, you specify a value to add at the top. So I'm just going to put date time and say just date time. And so what it's going to do is going to take this value, whatever you have, and put it in the front, like whatever your structure is. And it's going to allow you to put new things in here to kind of output new variables. So in my outcome, I'm going to do your two new variables, right? You said end of the month and end of the year?
Yeah, end of the month is the big one. End of the year would be cool, but end of the month is like the big one we need.
Yeah, end of the month. And that would just be a string, or would that be a date time?
Date time preferred.
Date time preferred. All right, so we're adding new date times to a date time. That's why I say this is kind of dangerous. So I'm going to put something like, you can obviously do some flow steps in here to determine what's the end of the month, and I can show you how to do that if you'd like. But I'm just going to put a constant date in here for now. I'm going to do the day I was born, if no objections here. I'm going to do 1994, August 14th. Everyone mark your calendar. Birthday is coming up. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to save this. And now every time where that date time object is referenced, it should give us a value on the outcome that is end of the month. So I come in here, I'm just going to create a new folder called testing thing. Yeah, testing thing sounds fine. Create a designer folder. I'm going to go ahead and create a flow. Testing thing flow. I'm going to go ahead and just create that. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of validate whether it exists now. So let's do a date time. Thing. So we don't get any validations. I'm going to pick date time. And hopefully this works. My birth date. Take that as a date time. And now we'll see. Open up current date time. Ooh, end of the month right here. No, we did end of the year, right? Doesn't look like it worked.
I think you did end of the month.
Did I name it end of the month?
Yeah.
End of the month. No, I don't think so. I think that's just a property that's on here. But it looks like it's date time. Did I name it end of the month? Here, let's go back. Let's duplicate. Tab, go back into that extension. Technical difficulties, guys. I did name it end of the month. Well, okay, let's see if this works. End of the month. Add it to my birthday. Let's debug and see what happens. Oh, 08/14/1994.
Sweet.
Perfect. Okay, so you can add a data extension on the date time type. So again, this is going to run every single time a date time is present. It's going to find that value, right? So it could be very costly, right? Now, what I would recommend here is if you didn't want to do that, if this is like maybe a one-off where you need the end of the month, I would just recommend creating a subflow that would find the end of the month for you, and you can just put it in your flow. Because you might get some performance hits here, right? Every time it has a date time, every time you use a date time in your whole system, it is going to run this subflow, this data extension, and find this end of the month, end of the year, right?
Okay.
That can be very costly, it could be very ill performance. So just make a subflow. That's probably the easiest and least costly of the two options here. So the next, well, I guess first, are you all set with this answer? Does this sound
Yeah,
good?
that's perfect.
Okay, cool. Another thing in here you have is, can we dynamically include rules in a rule set? So rule sets have a couple types of things that you can do. There's a couple types of rule sets. And so if you needed dynamic rules, so let's say some rules are used in some cases and some are not, there is a type of rule set you can use. Let's see if I have the rule sets. I do not. Give me a quick minute. Let me download that. I am on a low version. This you shouldn't have to do anymore. Flow set should be automatically included. So let me just install flow sets. Let me go to our documentation site. So rule sets have a good feature in it called, or there's a type of rule sets called rule sets with instances. Essentially what that allows you to do is you allow you to create a rule set, which is a bunch of rules combined together. And then once you've done that, you can set up an instance. Now an instance is essentially, let me restart my services manager. Sorry, I can't talk and think at the same time. Oh, where is it? Where is it? Services manager, restart. Okay, so essentially it allows you to say, I want these rules run every single time. And based off this instance ID, I want these sets of rules run. So you can have multiple kind of things going on here, right? You can have every rule run if you want to, or you can just give it a specific instance ID and an instance of those rules that run. But I can showing you is way better than talking about it. So essentially, I was working on a project one time where they wanted to write rules based off of rules based around insurance. And so essentially they had rules they wanted to run every single time. Is user 18? Is something, have they been, I don't know, been employed for the last 5 years, like something like that, right? But then they also had these state specific rules that with whatever state they were involved in, they wanted to run these specific rules, which were like, I don't know, did he grow up in Chicago or something like that, right? In Virginia, maybe it was like, is he from, the 757 area code, or if he grew up in Richmond, he doesn't deserve insurance, something like that, right? So what you can do here is you can say, I have these rules I want run every time, and these rules I want more state specific. So I can come in here and add a designer folder. I'm gonna do state specific rule set. I'm gonna do add designer folder. Come in here, create rule, and you're gonna get a new one called rule set. Go ahead and create this. I'm gonna do rule set with instances. And this is not how it's determined. So you come up here and in the setup section, setup of the rule set, you can hear and say template with instances, right? Now you can do this. Okay, so you have here, let me just refresh. I think you might have to. Essentially, you can right click it and add create instance, right? So in this case, I'm going to do Virginia, right? I'm making state specific rules. So I have my rules that are run every single time, but I also have instances that I can run on certain occasions. And so the best use case here is like, if you go to put it inside of a flow. So let's go ahead and go to this and let's create a flow. Run rule set flow. I should probably name it better, name it more specific because it's probably going to give me it right here. It's probably going to say run rule set. Run flow / rule set. And this is going to say you can pick your rule set. I'm going to pick my rule set with instances. And I come out here and this is going to be my run rule flow set ID. That is the specific instance. So I can come up here and go to my Virginia and say, give me my rule set ID, copy that text. And then I can just constant pasted in there, right? So it's going to run my template, but based off of like maybe something else, I can run these rules as well. So this is a good use case if you want to run some rules, some cases, some not. As well as there's another feature that I am just becoming aware of nowadays. If I were to add a rule to this rule set, so let's add an evaluation rule. Evaluation rule 1, it's a good name for it. I can come in here and there's these things called enabled rules. And I can basically say, do you want to run this rule based off of certain criteria? Now, if you could find a good way to use these, I would love to see you do it. I've never used it myself, but I kind of want to know what's going on here, right? If I hit use enabled rules, it's going to give me a rule that I can edit to determine basically whether or not my rule is actually run, right? So based off of certain criteria, we can say, do you want to run this rule or do you want to skip it? And I can use a rule to determine whether I run a rule. Gets very
Ruleception.
it gets very ruleception like. You go into a rule set to go into a rule to go into an enabled rule. So that's also kind of an alley you can go down. But I think you're looking more for the rule set with instances, whereas like in some cases I want to run these rules, some cases I don't. So
yeah, that's perfect. And so
yeah.
Yes, I've got a rule table up front passing in a list of like, here are the 5 rule sets to run with instances. And so you would just loop through that. Okay. All right, cool.
Yeah. And I mean, so you can run through a rule set or you can have the rule set and then run through certain instances of that rule set to give you certain data. But yeah.
Yeah, so we could run the Virginia rule set and then run the gender rule set, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Whatever criteria you have. So.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep. Based off of something before that. So yep. I hope that's helpful. Cool. So all right, Tyson, thanks for asking those questions. I think those are very informative to everyone because they're talk about some things that aren't normally talked about. So okay, so Jeff, you have a question now. This morning from a ticket I submitted, there was a report on the shows all validation errors on all elements. Flow and rule validation report not found. System administration, system tools, flow management. What determines whether or not these also show up on system validation lists? It seems to be kind of random. For example, the report shows that I have several dozens of these. Input name, user ID may conflict with system parameters when the flow is called directly via URL, but only fetch shows up, but only a few show up in system validation. So you have a couple flows that have kind of the same error, the same system validation that's returning, right?
Yeah.
And you say some of them show up on this list, some of them don't. Is that kind of?
Yeah. So the spirit of this is I thought the system validation list was showing all the element validations, like the ones you see when you open up the flow, but I was told that that's actually on this other report, on the flow management.
Yeah. I can't speak to too much knowledge about this because I'm really not too sure. I think your support ticket should, the person who's owning that support ticket should get there. But the way I think about it is if it's system validation or like an element validation, it'll show up on a certain one versus a flow validation, like something in your flow is wrong.
Okay.
There's like a difference between like maybe flow validation lists and a element validation list. Element validation is going to go into the flow and go to the certain element, and your flow validation is going to say this whole flow is broken or has something wrong with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So actually that flow and rule validation report under the flow management tools does both. It'll give you validation errors of the flow itself and steps within the flow.
Where's this at? This is under system
Administration, system tools, flow management.
Okay, gotcha.
And it was a little misleading because I had a certain validation error that I was working on with Heath, and I responded to the one that I was seeing showing up in the system validation, which is like if you go to the lower left there where the red exclamation is. But then I didn't realize that there were other ones because those were only showing up rule.
So this looks like a whole system kind of error versus where we were at in the kind of system, or in the we were in administrative system tools, flow management, flow and rule validation. This looks like it tells me like specific flows that are wrong.
Yeah.
At like a flow level. And then, okay, I have seen down in that exclamation point 1 issue, I've seen dependency errors there, where it's like this flow is dependent on this, but this flow is missing, something like that. So
Yeah.
I really hope support will be able to provide you a little bit of clarity there. But that's what it seems like. These are overwhelming like system issues versus this flow and rule validation. Like these are flow specific objects that you have issues with inside.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I just didn't know if there was if you knew a hard and fast rule of which ones would bleed up to the system validation. But it sounds like maybe.
Yeah, I mean, let's go in and check, right? Let's go in the system validation rules. Let's click on this. I'll go on this pen and let's not alter, but look at this. So this is system validation issues. I guess there's a full type called system validation issues, but it looks like the data source is locked, so I can't really tell. Maybe it's a query. Okay. If you go to flow management, flow and rule validation, this looks like it's its own type as well. Flow and rule validation issues. So looks like you can include flows or include rules at your leisure. So I'm not sure what these are, but support should be able to do some digging to figure out where this data is coming from and point you in the right direction. So because it looks like, we're obviously getting it from these two types and these two objects. Now what those objects are pulling from, I can't really tell right now, but you do some digging in the database, figure out if they're queries, figure out if they're stored procedures gathering this data. We should be able to tell.
Is there a way to get to that, like that flow rule validation source?
It looks like I can't can't alter it, but I'll tell you what. Pull up my SQL Management Studio. Which is pulling it up. It's very slow. Okay. One second. So this is my current database right here.
Okay.
And so let's see, I got database diagram. I guess I don't have database diagram. Got a ton of tables here. And so one of my favorite queries is the search all through the database query, right? So let me go ahead and get that query from, you could get that query. I don't store it in a specific spot. It's just based on, it's in a chat that I have with a coworker. It's just, I think I gave it to him like probably over 3 years ago. I'm still going to it every single time to try to get it. I'm going to go ahead and hit this declare. I'm going to do new query. Stress testing. Click this. This is going to search through my whole database. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to find this outcome scenario. Done. And this is going to be the best I can do for now. Is just try to see if that label, if that something exists in anywhere in my tables. Incorrect.
I have to double quote.
Oh, double quote. All right, we'll just do outcome scenario. How about that? Might be a lot of stuff containing outcome scenario, but this is essentially what your support ticket, person that's supporting is going to do. Entity header data search content. I don't think it's not gonna give me anything, but let's look in here, see if I have any system boot record, system validation, no system validation. Let's minimize this tables. Let's look into views. Stored workflows. No. Yeah, we should be able to figure. I just don't think I can speak to it right now.
Okay.
Jeffrey. So yeah, they should be able, and I'll assist them in that. If you send me the ticket number, if you want to email it to me, I can help them try to find it.
Okay. Thanks.
So, appreciate that, man. Cool. Okay, so let's see. Jackie, you submitted a question. It says, can you show an example that terminates a workflow request after a specific amount of days? So when you talk about a workflow request, are you talking about a an assignment or something like that?
Not the whole flow, right?
The whole flow you're trying to terminate?
Yeah. And I want to put it to a close or a terminate status.
Yeah. Okay. So is this workflow stuck on something, or is this workflow like stopped at any certain point? What's keeping this flow in an active status?
So timing. So the contributors have a certain amount of time to complete their requests, and after a certain amount of time, like they get warnings and escalations. But at the end, if they haven't done anything with it in 15 days, I need it to go to the completed status or terminated status.
And so when you say that they're interacting with something, do they have the flow up, or do they kind of like, they have an assignment in their inbox that they're trying to complete?
So one of the assignments hasn't, anywhere in the flow, they haven't actually actioned anything for a certain amount of time.
Gotcha. And so, all right, so the reason I ask that is on forms. If I go ahead and pick or create a form over here, and I go to assigned, I can actually go to assignment setup, and it says specify expiration date, and that'll say like, here you can say you want it to throw an exception, you want it to go, expire without assigning or something like that. Whatever you need to do, there's kind of options here. What you want to do is compute date and say, let's say start time in the future after like, what would you say, 15 days?
Well, yeah, but I have all the assignments, like I have all the reminders set. So I have a warn, I have a late, I have a escalation. But the terminate part, I'm not sure how that works.
Yeah, so this is what it's going to do. This expire, right? If I hit done, I'm going to get a new outcome called assignment timeout, and I can navigate that to wherever it needs to go.
Okay, so there's nothing else extra than I have to do there. There's no, well, I want to set the state and whatnot, but it will complete the flow.
It will complete the form,
okay,
and give you a path to go wherever you need to go. I've had some workflows, some clients that they wanted to expire and they wanted to go to like their manager, right? So we would just go to another flow or go back to the same form and just assign it to someone else. That could be a route you want to do. It's just kind of whatever you need to do. It gives you the path so you can, it can be flexible with that.
Right, but it will go to the end, right? Like I want it to go to end, so I would just use a go to end. Okay.
You can use a go to end step, or you can navigate somewhere else. Sometimes I like to alert people saying, "Hey, this assignment was, this assignment expired." I don't know. Give them follow up notes instead of just dropping it from their inbox.
Right, emails. Yep. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Let me know if you need anything else involving this. Okay.
Sure.
Sweet. Okay. Do we have any other questions before I just start ranting, or does everyone here just come for the rant? I guess you guys can't talk, so you can put it in the chat, but yeah. So, okay, cool. So we don't have any other questions. So I guess I'm going to kind of just like show you what I've been building lately. Now some customers, or some businesses or some workplaces might be moving towards a proof of vaccination kind of thing. They want to make sure all of their employees are valid, or all of their employees have been vaccinated, So I've been working on building this workflow called a proof of vaccination. And we'll just continue that here. So what I want to do is I want to get some way for us to get a list of email addresses. And email addresses are first name and last name or something that I can make an account and have that user go to a dashboard and submit information about their vaccination. And so what I'm doing right now is I set up the flow to take in an email or take in an Excel document. So if I go to this process, create vaccinations assignments flow, you can see that right here. I'm doing a simple, like, go ahead, upload an Excel document. And then what it'll do is take that Excel document, turn it into, like, you can download the template file here, and that'll be just kind of an example of, like, okay, do you want full name, email, approver full name, approver for email? Oh my gosh, I do not have an Excel. So it's just going to close that out. But yeah, it's going to say, like, fill out this, give us this Excel document with this acquired information, and we're going to process it and do everything else. So I turned it into a named and email structure. And right now I am looking to branch for each one of those items that I got from the Excel document. I want to submit, I want to create an account for everybody and cast them all an assignment to do something. So I did a simple thing, simple couple steps here. I generate password for account. I want to create the account. I want to get the account that I just created because I have to make some changes to it for it to be legitimate. One of the changes is change password on login. That is a field on the account structure that'll basically say, once they type in their first initial, once they type in the initial password, then it'll force them to set their own password. So we can give them a temporary one, and then they can create their own, so because we don't want to manage their passwords, that just sounds miserable. So they can change their own password, they can set their own password. And then I also want to move the account into a subfolder. I know if anyone has worked in the system long and had to set up a bunch of accounts, you can basically guarantee this account folder right here is going to get slam full of accounts. But what you can do is you can set up in, like, a subfolder of accounts where you can kind of organize them. Best practice here is if you have a project that you have built multiple accounts for, or maybe groups that you built multiple groups for, you would have a subfolder to put those specific groups based off of that specific project. And I like to do the same thing for accounts. Any account that was made for a specific project, I put it in its own kind of subfolder. So if you have a project that's creating accounts, this is good practice to kind of separate the accounts made by one project versus accounts made for the system and for the server itself. So it's just a good practice there. And so I like to move the account into that separate folder, and then I want to cast them an assignment. So once I have casted the assignment, I want them to fill it out, and that's kind of where I left off. Couple things, simple things on here. I want to have some basic instructions. I'd recommend putting instructions at the top of your assignments. Typically, these assignments we build in decisions are not this person's only job, right? It's typically just an assignment that they got as a part of their job, right? So sometimes we open up assignments and I'm like, I have no idea what to do. Should I fill out this information? Should I do, what should I do here? And so putting a instructions tab at the top and making sure you can make changes to that instructions as as the system exists is a good idea. So after that, I want them to select the type of vaccination they got, location where they were administered the vaccine, first vaccination date. If they select the second vaccine required, then it pops up this new grid that allows them to I have a request where I want to do them to upload specific files. Information or something, I don't know. A selfie of them at the CVS might be good, just to further prove that they did it. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at here. And so the next couple steps here is, how am I going to save this information? And how am I going to save the files? the system, I want to make sure it's robust, right? Because, if a bigger company comes to us and say, oh, I have 14,000 accounts and I want all of them to prove our vaccination. I want this to be able to handle 14,000 accounts, as well as, n number of files that a specific account can provide. If a certain customer provides 4 files, then that's, let's say every customer provides at least 1, so that's 14,000. And then if someone provides 2 or 3, then, it just grows from there, right? So file storage and data storage is going to be actually really valuable here, because I want to make sure it's stored properly, that we can handle multiple rows. In the addition, I want to also add something so that they can provide booster shot, dates or something like that, and let them, provide n number of booster shots. I don't want them to just be allowed to provide 1. But whenever they get 1, I want them to come in here and like alter it or change it or something like that. So this is kind of where I'm at. But there's a lot of good practices in here that I kind of wanted to make sure you guys know of, and that's the account subfolder. Must change passwords, a good thing when you're creating accounts from a flow. There's also a couple things in here. Every single type of kind of internal service, anything that messes with accounts, always asks for a context type, because there's every flow, every step is run on context type, like automatically. It's going to check who you are and do you have access to run this step? Do you have access to run this flow? And there's sometimes where we do want that. We want a person to, if they don't have access, I don't want them running the step, and that's great. But sometimes for these account steps and these internal steps, we need it to run every single time, regardless of who they are, right? For this create accounts, we don't want to necessarily give the person account access or access to the account's structure, but we do want them to be able to create accounts. And that's where this context type becomes super important. If you need a step to run every single time, regardless of who's using it in like the account kind of setup, you always want to set the context type to system. That's like a really important thing. You also have user ID and password, you have session ID, however you want to handle this. But if you need this step to run every single time without failing, regardless of who's running it, system. Now, on the other hand, if you want this to run only if the person has access to, then you set it up to current user, right? There's also user ID and password that you can set up. I've personally never used that. I'm not sure why someone would want to type in user ID and password into this. But maybe they do. Maybe they want them to have a specific user's access or something like that. And session ID will do the same thing, but it'll allow you to give it a name session ID. And name session ID is essentially the same thing as typing the user ID and password in there, but it's of a specific name session, and name session only has permissions on what you give it. So, but yep, that's kind of all I wanted to talk about. If there's not any other questions, we might go ahead and just end early. If anything here excites you, or you kind of want to like talk through the basics of what I kind of discussed, I'm available via email, josh@decisions.com, and I welcome questions. So any questions we have while we're still here? Okay, then if not, we'll go ahead and end early. Thanks everyone for coming, and I hope you enjoyed the Decisions Lunch and Learn. Reach out if you need anything. Oh, no, never mind. Josh Levy asked, any experience with SSO and SAML? Not personally, but there's a guy on the support team named Straz who is very educated on SSO and SA and SAML. So reach out in a support ticket, tell him you're struggling with that, and we'll route it directly to him.
Thanks, appreciate it. I saw the Okta module.
Yeah.
So I think maybe going to that, I can get some pointers. What was your coworker's name?
His name is Ryan Straz at decisions.com. But if you send a support ticket, we'll route it to him. So just email it to support@decisions.com.
Okay. Yeah, I'm actually working on a create account flow. So yeah, this was interesting to see. I think I'll shoot you some questions by email.
Yeah, sounds good. Please do.
Appreciate it.
Thanks. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.